So you're about to watch the press breakfast we had with Carlo Petrini, the founder of Slow Food, and Woody Tasch, the founder of Slow Money, two giants of slow. Super inspiring, and somewhere in there you'll see my question, just sort of saying, we agree with all what you're saying, it's all great and inspiring, but how is it actually going to take effect or win out when most of the world is just being run over by bulldozers and consumption right now? So hope you enjoy it as much as we did.
To each in your own words describe how you view the intersection between slow money and slow food.
So the intersection is inspiration and intersection. Obviously, I was very inspired by Carlo and Slow Food, otherwise I wouldn't have called the book Slow Money. I didn't know we were starting an organization called Slow Money. I had no thought about that. We've been speaking about patient capital for a couple of decades. And obviously, once you think about what patient capital might be, and then you think about slow food, it's not too much of a leap to get to slow money. The other thing I would say is, when I'm asked in general what's the relationship between slow food and slow money, I say I hope slow money will become the best friend slow food ever had as we continue to grow.
Ma l'elemento che ci unisce è che operiamo per la difesa e la tutela dell'economia che sostiene l'agricoltura e sostiene il cibo sostenibile.
Well, the common element that we have is that we all work to defend and safeguard the economy and agriculture and an economy which are both sustainable.
Con approcci diversi,
with different approaches,
con metodi diversi,
and with different methods,
però col medesimo
but
obiettivo.
exactly with the same goal.
Io quando vedo questa assemblea di Slow Money,
So when I see this great meeting of Slow Money,
mi sembra di vedere un incontro di slow food.
but I think it is just like a slow food meeting.
Vedo gente appassionata sul fronte delle comunità di supporto, dei mercati agricoli.
Because I see so many people who are so fond, so passionate about the community-supported agriculture, about the farmers' markets.
Vedo gente che ha una visione del cibo e della centralità del cibo
And I see that these people have understood the central role of food.
e che pensa che questa attività può cambiare le cose, cambiare la socialità.
And these people have understood that this way they can really change life, they can really change the way people interact with each other.
I'd like to add something too. If you think about how we can use our time and money to affirmatively influence the direction of the food system and the economy, there are several ways. One is political action, let's say lobbying and advocacy and voting. Another is using our consumer dollars as a vote. So that's buy local campaigns and know your farmer and buying as direct as possible, etc. But then there's this other big elephant in the room. It's called where are our investment dollars? And so we're bringing the investment dollars to the table.
And I was telling Carl, I went to the first slow food meeting in Colorado many years ago, and nobody knew what slow food was. Do you find now that your original idea of what slow food was has either changed into something you didn't expect, or become things that you didn't actually want to be part of slow food?
Ma io penso che la vera rivoluzione è l'evoluzione.
Well, I do think that the real revolution is evolution.
Slow Food nasce nel 1983
Slow Food was born in 1989.
E nasce con un focus specifico che era di difendere la diversità culturale.
And at that time, its main focus was to defend cultural diversity.
Quindi nasce già subito con un'idea mondiale, planetaria,
So from the very beginning, it really had a very global vision, a very global idea,
per rispettare tutte le culture alimentari.
in order to respect all the different food cultures.
Poi man mano che il tempo passa il corpo cresce.
And then as time goes by, obviously the body grows.
E allora come i bambini hanno i pantaloni corti,
And so just like kids wearing shorts,
crescendo il corpo devi cambiare il vestito.
as your body grows, you have to change your clothes.
Devi adattarti al cambiamento fisico.
And you have to adapt to this physical change.
Nell'89 Slow Food non aveva presenze nel mondo, se non in Italia e pochi paesi.
In 1989, Slow Food was present just in a few countries, in Italy and not many others.
Nel 2004 Slow Food era presente in 40 paesi.
But in 2004, it was present in 40 countries.
Quell'anno noi abbiamo realizzato la rete di Terra Madre,
And in that year, we organized the Terra Madre Network,
una rete di contadini, pescatori, nomadi,
a network including farmers, fishermen, nomads,
giovani
and young people
di 120 paesi.
from 120 countries.
E in quel momento la rete si è allargata ulteriormente.
So at that time, we were able to further expand this network.
Oggi siamo in 170
And
paesi.
nowadays, we are present in 170 countries.
Però abbiamo accettato questo nuovo vestito
But we have accepted to wear this new dress
senza burocratizzarsi,
without getting too bureaucratic,
senza chiudersi in una logica di tipo partito, tipo sindacato,
without really having a structure similar to that of a political party.
accettando questa dimensione fluida.
And instead, we have accepted this kind of fluid, liquid dimension.
E questo è quello che in questo momento ci sta dando più soddisfazione.
And this is exactly where our main satisfaction comes from.
Noi oggi siamo in paesi poverissimi
We are now present in very poor countries,
e parliamo di gastronomia,
and we are there to talk about gastronomy,
perché anche il paese più povero ha la sua gastronomia
because even the poorest countries have their own gastronomy,
e va rispettata.
and we have to respect it.
E rispettare la gastronomia di un paese povero
And respecting the gastronomy of a poor country
vuol dire aiutare l'agricoltura di quel paese,
means helping the agriculture of that country.
vuol dire aiutare i pescatori,
It means helping fishermen
i nomadi,
and
i
nomads
trasformatori.
and all the food processors.
Allo stesso tempo qui negli Stati Uniti,
And at the same time, here in the US,
in questi anni qualche cosa l'ha fatto Slow Food USA.
well, Slow Food USA has reached a lot of results.
E anche con la connessione con Slow Money
Also thanks to the connection with Slow Money.
è una risposta adeguata a questo paese,
And it is definitely the suitable response to this country's needs,
con l'intendimento di salvaguardare la biodiversità,
with the ultimate goal of safeguarding biodiversity.
perché questo è un paese immenso.
Because this is a huge country.
La logica gastronomica di New Orleans, la logica gastronomica di New Orleans
So the gastronomic logic of New Orleans, for example,
non è comparabile con quella del New England
is not comparable to that of New England
e neanche con quella del Portland
or to Portland,
o del Colorado.
Colorado.
Vivere la
So
diversità
we have to leave this diversity.
significa rispettare l'economia
And it
locale.
means that this way you respect local economies.
Quindi da quando lui ha conosciuto lo Slow Food,
So since you got in contact with Slow Food,
il bambino è cresciuto.
the child has grown up.
Basta volergli
The
bene
important thing is that you keep on loving him
e lui cresce in buona
and he
salute.
will grow very healthy.
Grazie.
Maybe you would have
I
jumped in on
would like
that.
to know if Carlo will adopt me.
How do we widen the conversation, both with Slow Money and with Slow Food, to include those poor countries, poor individuals? I think the great danger in so much of the food conversation that we have in this country right now, and the money conversation, is how to not have it not be perceived as what I've heard called an elitist preoccupation. That it's just a conversation that's having the people that have the power and the money to have that conversation, as opposed to everyone.
The most immediate and easiest answer is crowdfunding. Now, it's funny for me to start with that because I have all kinds of questions about how crowdfunding in general is really going to work over time, and not just for us. But I would say democratizing the funding process, in other words, allowing lots of people with very little amounts of money to participate, that's the most obvious answer. That's the most obvious immediate answer to part of what you're asking. But the bigger question is, well, and before I go on, I would say one thing I'm very intrigued by, and maybe I'll say proud of, if we prove that we can manage this well going forward, is the very big, broad diversity, financial diversity of the people who are coming to the table with slow money. Meaning it's everybody from quite wealthy people to people who have a few $100, a few $1,000 and want to be involved, and that's the tent. It's a very big tent. But the bigger question about elitism you're asking to me is comes up all the time in any discussion of food system change. We get a little bit of a different spin because we're talking about investing. So by definition, if you're talking about investing, you're putting yourself in a certain place in the, let's say, discussions of economic power and money and whatnot. But stepping back from that, I would just say it seems to me if we're making a transition from several hundred years or more of one direction, and that direction is ruthlessly externalizing all these actual costs in order to create cheap things, right? And now you're moving towards a vision that's saying we no longer have the luxury of externalizing all those costs. You know, who are going to be the first people who can actually pay to internalize the costs? And the first group is going to be people who have a little more money. So that doesn't mean there's something wrong with the movement. It doesn't mean there's something intellectually or morally suspicious about it. It just means everything can't happen all at once. There's going to be a phase of change. But it's obvious that the ultimate destination is, let's say, real food or good food or clean food, fair food for everybody. And that's the ultimate destination.
Paesi poveri, noi non viviamo questa schizofrenia tra paesi poveri e paesi ricchi.
We shouldn't live this kind of schizophrenia between poor and rich countries.
E siamo convinti che la realtà ci dice che in questi paesi c'è una giovane generazione che combatte, che è attiva e che è molto in campo.
And we have seen that in these countries there are a lot of young people who are very determined and who are really ready to fight.
Perché in molti casi ci sono dei governi canaglia.
Because very often in these countries you really find rogue governments.
Il dovere che abbiamo noi,
so our duty,
dei nostri paesi,
I mean, of our countries,
paesi ricchi dell'Europa e degli Stati Uniti,
rich countries in Europe and in the US,
non è quello di aiutare questi paesi con una forma di carità.
So our duty is not to help these countries with charity,
ma denunciare le imprese che in questi paesi, le nostre imprese che in questi paesi vanno a realizzare esternalità negative.
But instead we have to report those enterprises, those companies coming from our countries who go to these poor countries in order to create these negative externalities.
Sono imprese europee e degli Stati Uniti d'America che fanno land grabbing in Africa.
Well, it is the European and the US companies who are responsible for the land grabbing in Africa.
Sono multinazionali del cibo come la Nestlé e la Danone che distruggono l'agricoltura africana e di tanti paesi dell'America Latina.
And it is food multinationals, food corporations like Nestlé and Danone who are actually destroying the land in Africa.
Sono molti governi che sostengono gli organismi geneticamente modificati.
And there are many governments supporting GMOs.
Io sono un grande tifoso e voglio molto bene a Obama.
I'm a great supporter and I do really love Obama.
Ma quando Obama difende le multinazionali degli organismi geneticamente modificati e vuole introdurle in Europa o in Africa.
But when Obama defends the multinationals producing genetically modified organisms and he wants to introduce them in Africa and in Europe,
Oppure sostiene che bisogna allevare gli animali con gli
or
antibiotici
maybe claims that animals have to be raised by using antibiotics,
delle grandi multinazionali
again
americane.
with the support of the great American multinationals.
Io non sono
corporations.
d'accordo con Obama
Well, I don't agree with Obama.
e non sono neanche d'accordo con quelli che hanno uno spirito caritatevole,
And I don't even agree with those who just want to go on the charity,
tipo Bill Gates,
just like Bill Gates, for example,
che vuole salvare l'Africa dalla fame
because he wants to save Africa and destroy hunger,
e schiaccia l'occhio agli organismi geneticamente
but
modificati.
actually it blinks his eye in the sense that he supports GMOs to a certain extent.
No,
But that's not
bisogna
acceptable.
puntare sull'agricoltura locale.
Instead, we have to focus and to invest on local economy.
Sono le donne africane che salveranno l'Africa dalla
So
fame.
it will be the African women who will save Africa from hunger.
È l'agricoltura dei villaggi, la piccola agricoltura che salverà questo continente dalla fame.
And it will be the local economy that practiced in the small villages that is going to save this country.
E la carità verso gli OGM non fa il bene di questi paesi.
So the charity and the support to GMOs definitely is not positive for these countries.
Allora noi questo lo dobbiamo dire.
So we have to say it, we have to report the situation.
Ci ascoltino,
And people will have to listen to us.
ascoltino la sofferenza di questi
We
popoli.
will have to listen to the great suffering of these peoples.
Prima di farsi carico della fame di questi popoli sappiano ascoltarli.
So before trying to solve the problems, first of all, we'll have to listen to them.
So you called the actions of slow food the new political paradigm. Will you explain that?
L'illustrazione.
Sì, il nuovo paradigma politico, potresti definire quale il concetto di nuovo paradigma.
Siamo davanti a una crisi durissima,
So we're going through a very hard crisis.
è una crisi entropica.
This is an entropic crisis.
L'umanità ha speso più energia di quella che produceva.
And this is why mankind has spent more energy than the one that it was able to produce.
E questo nel mondo del cibo è sotto gli occhi di tutti.
And this is clear to everyone when talking about food.
E dalle crisi entropiche non si esce con i vecchi paradigmi.
So to get out of this entropic crisis, you can't use the old paradigms.
I vecchi paradigmi dicevano sei in crisi,
So the old paradigms just say, well, you are in a crisis at the moment,
riprendi fiducia,
so you have to be self-confident again
ritorna a consumare,
and start consuming once again.
l'economia
So
riparte
this way you can restore the economy,
e usciamo dalla
and
crisi.
so we will be able to get out of the crisis.
Questo è un vecchio
But it
paradigma
is an old
che non
paradigm
funziona più.
that is not longer effective.
È come prendere un malato di diabete e portarlo in pasticceria.
It's just like taking a person suffering from diabetes to a confectionery.
Se no, sei malato, mangia questa pasta,
So you're ill, you can eat all these sweet biscuits,
tu lo uccidi.
so that way you will kill him.
Noi oggi non abbiamo più bisogno di rafforzare un consumismo passivo.
So we shouldn't really strengthen this kind of passive consumption, of passive consumerism.
Abbiamo bisogno di nuovi cittadini
We need new citizens.
che cambino i propri comportamenti
We
individuali,
have to change our own individual behaviors
che riducono lo spreco,
and reduce waste
che rafforzino la solidarietà,
and strengthen solidarity
che costruiscono nuovi sistemi di distribuzione.
and develop new distribution methods.
Quello che è stato fatto in questo paese negli ultimi 20 anni è meraviglioso.
What you have achieved in this wonderful country over the last 20 years is really great.
È partito con delle piccole elite,
And you started with some elitist groups
quei piccoli mercati che sembravano solo riservati a chi aveva soldi.
and with very small markets. It seems like only the people who could afford.
In questo momento in Colombia c'è un processo di pace
At the moment in Colombia there is this peacekeeping process
e passa attraverso la terra.
and it's going through the land.
E in Africa è un'altra maniera.
And again that will be achieved in Africa in a different way.
Rispettare le
So
differenze,
it's very important to respect differences
costruendo una globalizzazione virtuosa.
by building a virtuous globalization.
Thank you. Waylon, did you?
A quick
Or did you want to
addendum to that, because I was going to add, and I'm glad Carlo ended on the word globalization, localization. So the new paradigm, I think, is a very broad, or the beginning of a very broad, kind of almost a visceral understanding that the search for cheaper and cheaper things in other places around the world, cheap labor, cheap land, resources that can be grabbed, that's called globalization and outsourcing. And now we're going to an era of localization and insourcing. I mean, people are actually beginning to talk about insourcing, a few people. But the idea of bringing manufacturing, bringing things back home. Now I'm speaking about the US a little there, but I think the pendulum globally, once the global system understands that there's only one globe, then we begin bringing things back home and figuring out how to do them in a way that makes sense near where we live.
Waylon, did you want to follow?
Yeah, it's a question for both gentlemen. You said the revolution is evolution, something like that. Hearing all these ideas, particularly yesterday, were very inspiring and fun. But I wonder, how is the revolution, when it's so small compared with the larger systems out there that are rapidly devouring the world's resources and the people with it, how are we going to win?
Non sappiamo se vinceremo,
Well, first of all, we don't know if it's going, we will be able to win.
possiamo anche perdere.
Maybe we might lose.
Però una cosa è sicura,
But there is one thing for sure.
che noi non possiamo avere un modello di governance simile a quello che hanno le grandi multinazionali, i poteri forti.
That we can't have a governance model that is similar to that of the big companies, of the powerful governments.
Perché loro si basano sulla violenza,
Because they're based on violence.
perché loro hanno il potere e i soldi per essere accentratori.
Because they have the power and the money to centralize everything in their own hands.
Il nostro processo è un processo più lento,
While our process is much slower
che è più diffuso.
and definitely more diffused, more widespread.
Non può essere governato con molta forza.
So it can't be ruled the same way with this kind of force of aggressiveness.
Ha bisogno della condivisione
It needs solidarity and sharing.
e quindi noi giochiamo con il tempo.
So we have to use time the right way.
I nostri tempi sono lenti,
We know we are very slow,
ma mettiamo delle basi solide.
but this way we can lay very strong foundations.
Sono due metodi totalmente
There
diversi.
are two completely different methods,
Però io ti posso dire con onestà
but I can honestly admit
che questo concetto di rafforzare il locale
that this concept of strengthening the local dimension
e poi partendo dal locale avere una visione
and
globale,
then starting from local, having a global vision,
nel lungo periodo sarà più forte dell'altro,
in the long term that will be a much more effective method than the previous one.
perché è più condiviso,
Because this way we share this concept with all the others.
perché è più democratico,
Because it's also more democratic.
perché riguarda di più la vita quotidiana delle persone.
Because it definitely concerns the ordinary life of each single person.
Arriveremo in tempo?
So we'll be able to get there on time?
Questo è il punto
Well,
interrogativo.
that's a big question mark.
Ma non abbiamo altre strade.
But we have no other way out.
Chi cerca strade più veloci
So if you look for faster methods,
può fare grandissimi errori.
you can make very big mistakes.
E del resto ci chiamiamo slow.
And that's why we're called slow.
All I would add to that, Waylon, is when I think about the big imponderable question, I guess I'll give two answers. One is kind of theoretical and one is personal. The theoretical answer is I just see it as a big historical pendulum. The pendulum of industrialization and consumerism and corporate everything is still going like this, still moving, still with all the momentum from China and other places. but it is eventually going to reach its zenith or its peak, and it is going to come back. And to the point of how much destruction it's causing as it keeps going for every degree like this, it's horrible, and who the hell knows how that's all going to work out. But the job is, all of us should be jumping on that pendulum and just giving it, trying to slow it down a little bit and get it to come back a little sooner, and that's all we can possibly do, I think. On a personal level, when I get asked, how can you possibly keep doing this every day, thinking all these little tiny investments are going to add up to anything? Or are you an optimist or a pessimist? You know, do you think we're ever going to, is there going to be an actual creative solution to the mess we've gotten ourselves into? I say I'm 99% pessimistic and 1% optimistic. But I wake up every morning in the 1%, and there's plenty of work to do, so I do it. And I mean it. When I wake up in the morning, there's so much to do, you just kind of do it. And not worry, not be paralyzed by all the systemic uncertainty.
My question is about that 99% probability that things may go very badly. And I'm wondering if there are ways in which the strategies that you're talking about now can also help us move through potentially a very bad period and out the other side. And if there's any variations in what you're describing that would be good to keep in mind for that sort of eventuality.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I always feel bad when I say the 99% pessimistic thing. There's been a very positive part of the experience of slow money for me, and that is that ideas matter. That people, it is possible to spread something very quickly just through the power of ideas. And I know Carlo has experienced that, obviously, in his own way. And it's possible that ideas will change behavior. So, and I won't say more in the interest of time on that. As far as, I think implicit in what we're doing is that there's immediate benefits. If you localize the food supply, if you build direct relationships with people near where you live, if you deepen your commitment to one another and to the place where you live, all of those things have immediate resilience benefits. I mean, there's just an immediate payoff. You know, whether the payoff will, how big of a shock those actions will be able to withstand is, again, it's, to me, I can't think in a system, in the big system terms of how it's all going to add up and how fast it's going to, whether a real safety net will be built and all of those things. But I think community by community, the benefits, and person by person, the benefits are very immediate. All right.
600 people waiting for your day. So, and then,
I'll see you.
well,
Okay. You can stay and talk to everybody if you want. It's up to you.
well, Carlo also is on a schedule.
Oh.
So he's got maybe.
All right. Sorry, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay.
And you've been saying in your speeches that we need to return respect to the elders and our youth, and also the women. And so I'd like to know, how do you envision the role of women, especially here in America, where we are known for our food shows, but not necessarily for our women who cook like they like.
No, tutto il mondo del cibo, tutto il mondo, ha un grande debito di riconoscenza per le donne.
Well, everywhere in the world, when talking about food, we should really consider the great importance of women, and we owe something to women.
Perché nella storia dell'umanità,
Because in the history of mankind,
la donna ha governato la capacità di garantire il cibo
women have always been able to guarantee food for the families,
in situazioni tremende
and in very difficult situations,
e con poche risorse.
and with not many resources.
E nella storia della gastronomia
And in the history of gastronomy,
non è mai stato riconosciuto questa cosa.
this merit has never really been acknowledged.
Non solo, ma non è mai stato detto grazie.
And basically, they have never been thanked for this work.
Era naturale che la donna fosse producesse il cibo.
It was quite natural that women had to produce food for the family.
E oggi siamo pieni di gastronomia.
And so nowadays we talk about gastronomy all the time,
Dominata dai
which
maschi
is mainly ruled by male people.
che vanno alla televisione,
So you see these men on TV,
che prendono le stelle
and they are awarded stars,
e tutti questi non hanno la memoria corta,
and they have a very short memory.
perché se dassero solo proprietà alle loro nonne
Because if you just considered what their grandmothers did,
capirebbero che i loro fondamenti sono basati su questi saperi.
they would understand that the foundations of their knowledge comes from them.
Allora io sono un gastronomo,
So I'm a gastronome.
mi interesso di cucina,
Obviously, I deal with cuisine. I'm interested in cooking and cuisine.
ma nessuno può parlare di futuro se non conosce il passato.
But you can't talk about our future if you don't know your past.
E il passato è stato merito delle donne.
And the past was definitely the merit of these women.
I più grandi piatti della storia dell'umanità l'hanno fatti le donne.
The greatest dishes in the history of mankind were made by women.
Se noi partiamo con questa
So
condizione,
if we start with this assumption,
possiamo parlare del futuro.
then we can talk about our future.
Diversamente tutto è tutto un parlarsi addosso.
Because otherwise, just hot air.
Non serve a niente.
It's basically useless.
Will you explain how it plays into what slow food does? How is it an additional or missing piece?
Ma lavorare per creare risorse
Well, we work to create resources
per un'agricoltura sana
in order to create a healthy agriculture,
è molto vicino alla nostra missione.
and obviously this is very close to our mission.
Quindi noi organizziamo la rete dei cittadini,
So we organize this network of citizens,
non solo consumatori.
not only consumers.
A me il termine consumatore non
But
piace.
I don't like this word, consumer.
Il termine consumatore è giovane, ha solo 3 secoli.
Well, this word is just 3 centuries old.
È nato con la rivoluzione
It
industriale
was created with the Industrial Revolution.
e vuol dire la consunzione,
And it means that you also consume yourself,
una sorta di malattia.
a kind of disease.
A me non piace il termine così.
And I don't like this word, honestly.
Io preferisco cittadino.
I do prefer the word citizen.
Cittadino è il riferimento.
So citizens are the real reference.
Slow Food organizza i cittadini,
So Slow Food organizes citizens,
ma anche i produttori.
but also producers
Organizza i trasformatori
and food processors
e i distributori.
and distributors.
Organizza i giovani,
So we organize young people,
i bambini nelle scuole con gli orti scolastici
and we also include children in schools with school gardens.
e rafforza questa rete.
And this way we can strengthen this network.
Se c'è un movimento, un'associazione che produce risorse per questa
So
rete,
if there is an organization who can produce resources for this network that you are developing,
molto bene.
well, that's obviously very positive.
Così come molto bene guardo tutte le altre associazioni ambientaliste.
And obviously I have also very positive impression of all the other environmentalist associations
Tutte le organizzazioni non
and
governative.
of all the non-governmental organizations.
Noi non abbiamo una logica esclusiva.
So we don't want to be exclusive from this point
Noi
of view.
siamo in una logica di condivisione.
We instead want to share with the others.
Se vogliamo vincere questa battaglia dobbiamo essere in molti.
So if we want to win this fight, we have to be a lot.
Quindi questa rete più larga è meglio è.
So the bigger the network, the better it is. That's it.
Thank you guys all.
Grazie
for coming.
mille. Grazie.